At an opera house in Budapest, Hitman Joe blends in with the audience while keeping an eye on his target and the bodyguards around him. Once everyone is seated and the show begins, Joe makes his way upstairs. A few minutes later, a bodyguard notices a shoe sticking out from behind a curtain and goes to check it out, but it's a setup. Joe suddenly attacks and kills him with a knife, hiding the body behind the curtain. Joe moves down the corridor and shoots another bodyguard before reaching his target on the balcony. The target offers to pay Joe triple his current fee, but Joe declines and shoots him in the head. He tells the man's date to stay quiet, and she runs off. Joe takes a moment to glance at the stage, locking eyes briefly with Maze, the show's star dancer. He decides to leave but starts feeling a headache and dizziness on his way out. Downstairs, another bodyguard notices the woman running and tries to contact his boss. When he gets no response, he rushes to the balcony and finds the bodies. Security spots him with a gun and tries to arrest him, but he opens fire. He only manages to kill one officer before the other hides and calls for backup. The bodyguard retreats to the balcony and shoots through the door when the officer follows. Suddenly, all the theater lights are turned on, and the bodyguard leaps off the balcony, landing on the stage. The audience and performers panic, scrambling to escape as an officer on the balcony shoots the bodyguard from above. In the chaos, Maze is pushed to the ground by the crowd, dropping her phone and injuring her hands and feet. Joe notices her, picks her up, grabs her phone, and helps her outside. Once Maze is safe, Joe experiences another painful headache. While she's distracted, he slips away unnoticed. At home, Joe realizes he still has Maze's phone. He takes some medication, downs a lot of alcohol, and heads to bed. The next day, Joe visits his doctor, who runs several tests and suggests that years of head trauma might be catching up to him. The results will take time, but the doctor advises Joe to start considering a career change. Later, Joe meets with his handler and friend Zivi, who also suggests Joe take a vacation and possibly find someone special. After hesitating for a while, Joe decides to visit the dance studio to return Maze's phone. She's thankful and gives him her number while playfully flirting. On his way out, Joe throws the number in the trash but quickly changes his mind and retrieves it. That evening, he awkwardly texts Maze and they agree to go on a date. Joe and Maze go out for dinner and have a fantastic time, though Joe never tells her the truth about his real job. Over the next few days, Joe splits his time between dating Maze and completing more mercenary missions in places like France, Romania, Austria, and Switzerland. As their relationship deepens, they begin spending most nights together. Unfortunately, Joe's headaches continue to get worse, and his medicine isn't working as well anymore. When the test results finally come back, the doctor gives Joe terrible news. He has a neurodegenerative brain disorder. There's no cure, and Joe only has about 3 months left to live. Shocked, Joe declines the doctor's offers for palliative care or therapy. Instead, he goes home and starts researching the disease online. He watches videos of patients losing control of their bodies and finds more information confirming there's no cure. Distraught, Joe grabs his gun and considers ending it all, but stops himself when he thinks of Maze. He opens a secret floor safe, takes out all his money, and gathers his weapons. Then, he throws every weapon he owns into the river. The next day, Joe visits Zvi and makes a shocking offer. He wants to pay $2 million to put a contract on his own head. Since life insurance won't pay if he takes his own life, this is the only way Maze can receive the money. But Zvi refuses, saying he would never put a hit on his best friend. Joe then visits Antoinette, a former assassin who now works as a handler. Her bodyguard Max is a ruthless killer with a reputation for brutality. Antoinette still holds a grudge against Joe because he killed her father, who had once mentored him. She happily agrees to put a contract on Joe's head. Joe asks her to activate the mission at midnight, giving him a few more hours to wrap things up. After Joe leaves, Antoinette uses the Assassin app to assign the job. First, she contacts Lovedoll, who is in Switzerland finishing another contract. He turns the job down, saying $2 million isn't worth the trouble. Next, the message goes to Goyang and his gang, who are at a karaoke bar in Prague. The gang, disguised as workers, quickly reveals themselves and kills their targets in seconds, thanks to their teamwork. Goyang eagerly accepts Joe's contract. Antoinette also sends the job to the Langos brothers, who are currently killing a man by tying him to their bikes and ripping him apart. That night, Joe meets with Maze, unaware that Max is following them. Joe breaks up with her, and though she's heartbroken, she gives him one last kiss before leaving in tears. Joe goes home and starts drinking while recording a video message for Maze, confessing everything about his life and why he put the hit on himself. He plans for the video to reach her after his death. However, he accidentally sends it before finishing. While Maze listens to the message, Joe gets an unexpected call from his doctor. doctor. The doctor reveals shocking news. Joe's test results were mixed up with another patient's. Joe finds out he isn't going to die. He's completely healthy and could live a long life. With only 5 minutes left until midnight, he quickly sets up a trap. Soon, Goyang and his gang arrive, using cigarette smoke to spot the laser sensor at the entrance. They easily dodge it and head further inside as Joe speaks from his hiding spot, telling them he's canceling the contract. Goyang refuses and reminds Joe that contracts are meant to be honored. One gang member follows Joe's voice to the bathroom, where Joe is waiting to fight. The man is skilled in martial arts, but Joe quickly overpowers him and throws him through a glass wall. A woman with an axe attacks Joe from behind, slashing his back. Joe pushes her onto the broken glass, dragging her throat across the shards to kill her. The first man comes back, furious, and tries a high kick, but Joe counters by breaking his leg and tossing him through the wall. Another gang member steps in with a sword, leading to another intense fight. After exchanging blows, Joe grabs the man's arm, breaks it, and disarms him before throwing him against a column to kill him. The last gang member, a woman with 2 large blades, charges at Joe. She lands a stab in his shoulder, but Joe fights through the pain and punches her hard, knocking out several of her teeth. Finally, it's just Goyang left. He throws a knife into Joe's leg, but Joe uses the blade still in his shoulder to kill Goyang. As a parting gesture, Joe lights one of Goyang's cigarettes before leaving the apartment. Once outside, he activates a trap that blows up his home, killing the toothless woman as well. Her body is launched out the window and lands on the gang's car, which explodes too. Joe uses Goyang's phone to call Antoinette and tells her the contract is canceled, but she can keep the money. Enraged, Antoinette refuses to let it go and doubles the reward. Hearing motorcycles approaching, Joe enters an old building and finds himself surrounded by the Langos brothers. They attack him using tricks with their bikes, managing to knock him down multiple times. Joe spots a pipe nearby, and when one of the brothers charges again, he hits him with it, knocking him off his bike and stomping on his head to kill him. The other brother screams in anger and speeds up to attack, but Joe kicks the bike's front wheel, sending the man flying. Joe takes the bike and uses it to escape. Meanwhile, Antoinette sends the contract to Europe's best assassins. Lovedoll, who's still enjoying himself with women in Switzerland, notices the reward is now 4 million and finally accepts the job. In Scotland, the Mackenzie brothers also take the mission and celebrate by smashing beer bottles on each other's heads. In England, the party girls, who are undercover as dancers, accept the job and reveal their weapons cleverly hidden in their small outfits, killing everyone in the club. One of the clients at the club tries to fight back, but the party girls easily overpower him with their combat skills. In Spain, a group of criminals is preparing some illicit goods for sale when Bodas shows up. Using his dance moves and the knives in his boots, he skillfully takes out everyone in the room. Meanwhile, Joe goes to Zvi's place, where Zvi uses glue to patch up Joe's wounds. Since Zvi is just a handler and doesn't have any weapons, the only thing he can offer Joe is some leftover explosives from another job. Zvi's wife also helps by giving Joe a deep massage that includes cracking his neck. Surprisingly, this instantly relieves Joe's headache, dizziness, and double vision. Elsewhere, Lovedoll arrives in Budapest by train, and Antoinette sends him all the information she has on Joe, including Maze's location. She also sends her cousin Money to pick Lovedoll up. Money is obnoxious and not very bright, but Antoinette promised her uncle she would train him to become a hitman. They track Maze to her building and surround her as she's leaving. Maze quickly reacts by kicking Money to the ground, but Lovedoll knocks her out with a punch and kidnaps her. The next morning, Joe heads to an old castle in the countryside, and Max quickly finds out about it. The intel is sent to all the hitmen, who rush to the castle. This is all part of Joe and Zvi's plan, since Zvi intentionally leaked the location. At the castle, Joe prepares all his weapons. The Mackenzie brothers are the first to arrive. They enter the castle, but Joe greets them by throwing a grenade. He then comes out to fight them. At first, Joe does well against just one brother, but when they team up, they overpower him and kick him into a set of armor. Joe grabs a gauntlet from the armor and uses it to throw stronger punches, but their teamwork keeps him struggling. Suddenly, the brothers start arguing over something dumb, and Joe takes advantage of the distraction. He activates one of his traps, pulling a rope that brings down a chandelier. One of the brothers gets trapped under it and is pushed into a mounted deer head, instantly getting impaled. Joe grabs a piece of antler and uses it to fight the other brother, exchanging blows before stabbing him to death. Right then, the party girls show up and open fire. Joe uses the second brother's body as a shield to escape into another room. The girls throw a grenade, but Joe dodges it and grabs one of the brothers' guns to fire back. Another grenade lands nearby, this time injuring Joe before he can find cover. The gunfight continues until Joe runs out of bullets. One of the girls tries to get closer, but she accidentally steps on one of Joe's traps, and the explosion brings her down. Joe quickly drags her body to a corner, pulls the pins on her grenades, and throws her at the other woman. The resulting explosion kills them both. Joe manages to grab grab one of their guns just before the blast sends him flying through a door. Bottas is waiting for Joe and quickly disarms him, putting on his earbuds so he can fight to the rhythm of his music. They engage in a hand-to-hand fight, and Bottas proves to be an incredible fighter, matching Joe's moves with ease. They throw each other around the room, with Bottas managing to hurt Joe using the knives in his boots. In response, Joe knocks out Bottas's earbuds. When punches aren't enough, they grab swords and continue their battle. After a fierce exchange, Joe manages to disarm Bottas, but Bottas grabs a gun and starts shooting. Joe dives behind a table to take cover and triggers a trap, blowing Bottas up and leaving behind only his boots. Outside, Lovedoll and his group arrive at the castle. Noticing all the vehicles from the other hitmen parked out front, Lovedoll immediately suspects a trap. He orders Money to stay behind and guard Maze while he goes to investigate. The moment Lovedoll is out of sight, Maze manipulates Money, claiming she needs to stretch her legs. As she pretends to stumble, she grabs a branch and knocks Money out cold. Meanwhile, Lovedoll calls Joe using Maze's phone and offers to release her if Joe surrenders. Their call is cut short when Max arrives with a heavily armed team. They storm the castle cautiously, aware of potential traps. Joe hides in the shadows and sets off an explosive, taking out half of Max's men. Then he sneaks up on a soldier, stabs him, and grabs his gun to take out the rest of the team in the room. Joe escapes through a back door, but Lovedoll is waiting for him in the garden and forces him to drop the weapon. Before they can talk, Maze suddenly appears, driving Money's car. She runs over Lovedoll and opens the door for Joe to jump in. The two speed away while Max's remaining men fire at them, but the shots miss. On the road, Joe finally opens up to Maze, explaining everything about the test results mix-up and revealing his real job. He assures her that he only killed criminals, never civilians, and promises he's retiring for good. Maze is relieved to hear this and reveals that she's pregnant. They agree to work things out together, but before they can celebrate, Maze passes out. Joe discovers she has a bullet wound in her neck. Panicking, Joe abandons the car and carries Maze to the nearest building, which turns out to be a church. Thankfully, the bullet only grazed her, and Maze regains consciousness quickly. Overwhelmed with relief, Joe proposes to her on the spot, and she says yes. The local priest is hesitant to perform the ceremony since they don't have a marriage license, witnesses, or a shared religion. Eventually, he agrees, but only if they confess their sins first. Joe's confessions about his many assassinations leave the priest horrified. However, when Joe explains that he wants to turn his life around and be a good father, the priest agrees to give him redemption, on the condition that Joe retires for good. The simple wedding begins, and Joe uses a grenade pin as a makeshift ring. Their ceremony is interrupted when Lovedoll shows up and starts shooting. Joe quickly tackles Maze to protect her, but the priest gets hit instead. Suddenly, a grenade is thrown into the church, and the explosion fills the room with smoke, giving Joe and Maze a chance to escape with the injured priest. The grenade came from Max, who begins arguing with Lovedoll over who gets the contract. While Joe and Maze tend to the priest's wound in the back room, Lovedoll opens fire and takes down a few of Max's men. Joe joins in and shoots some soldiers as well. More grenades are thrown, causing multiple explosions that start a fire inside the church. When Lovedoll tries to fight one of Max's men hand-to-hand, Max throws another grenade, causing a scaffolding to collapse and pin Lovedoll under it. With no soldiers left, Max searches the church and kills his last injured man to save him from suffering. Joe tries to ambush Max from behind, but they end up in a standoff. Unfortunately, Joe realizes he's out of bullets. Smirking, Max declares his victory, but before he can fire, Maze steps in and blows Max's head off. Meanwhile, Antoinette is packing her things to flee the country when Zvi shows up. He points out that, just like her father, she broke the rules. Before she can defend herself, Zvi shoots her in the head. Sometime later, Joe and Maze have a proper wedding officiated by the now recovered priest, with all their friends in attendance. Joe is ready to enjoy his retirement, but Maze reminds him that raising a child isn't cheap. She jokingly suggests he might want to take on a few more jobs. Don't forget to subscribe. Here's some more interesting story you don't want to miss.